a fantastic conference with so many rich, diverse presentations. What we're going to do now is I'm going to ask our esteemed panel to just give us, to go around and just give us a quick kind of summary of their thinking about the main points that came up in the day, but thinking about the question of legacy, because we are constituting, as we sit and speak here, a living archive. What do we do with this archive? How do we take that forward? How do we make sure that it informs the practices in the present and going forward in the future? For example, the question of the curriculum has come up quite a long time. How do we get this material as teachers, as artists, as curators, into the wider public realm that is not just discussed among ourselves? So I'd like to go around, starting with Lubaina, to give us your thoughts, and I'll hand over to Mark Seeley to close the conference. Okay?
Somehow knew it was a mistake sitting there. Never mind, I think I'd have learned by now, really. I think I am absolutely concerned with this question of legacy. And I think that perhaps the moving forward from the archive to the forging of the legacy maybe has been a little slower than we might like, because it is quite difficult to encourage the making of something new when you know in your heart that not enough people know about the making of the old. And I think that many of us have tried very hard to be that generous, but that the work in the last couple of years by many of the people that were speaking today and that are here today is really going to help that, because it feels absolutely the right time, but also I think it's taken us actually 30 years to join up many of the dots between collections, between writers, between older artists, between the generation before us of artists, and to see the artists that are sort of our children coming through. And I mean, so I haven't really given you an answer, but that's what happened to me today. We've seen the work on the screen of Mona Hatoum, Shaila Berman, Maud Salter, Gavin Yanches, Eddie Chambers, Amanda Holliday, Frank Bowling, Rashida Reen, Claudette Johnson, Sonia Boyce, Keith Piper, Donald Rodney, Tam Joseph, Mitra Tabritian and Marlene Smith, all in one day, in one place, flashing before us. And some of us are seeing other shows at the same time, and other shows that we could make with newer artists that we know, with artists from France and from Germany that we could juxtapose that with. And I think that's what's come out of today for me, is like, this is the moment, let's grab it.
Okay, follow that. Great, and thanks very much for a wonderful kind of conference, and it's been so rich, and Lubaina has given a kind of an amazing list of artists who we've been able to see and listen about their work. I guess in a way I'm just going to raise three kind of issues that have been thinking about as I kind of went through the day, and I think it's important to talk a little bit always in a feminist and situated way as to where I'm speaking from. And I think one of the things that was interesting for me was to listen of the Wolverhampton Art Gallery in the conference in 1982, and me studying as an undergraduate in Warsaw during the same period of time, having come off the boat, so to speak, from the Caribbean. And so, and being put into a kind of a frame that was around independent photography, that kind of movement around screen studies, and not within the art school environment. So I kind of came to meet you guys from the mid-80s onwards, in a way. And I think that's quite important. And I think also it emerged that I came to this kind of moment and movement with the work with Autograph at the period, as Cobby's saying, around politics of representation. And I'm sure Mark will be saying more about that in relation to Autograph and the work of Black Audio. But to me, there's also something about that kind of period of collectivity which allowed for the very interesting work for the Black Art movement that obviously I kind of got to know, that comes into this moment of talking about a more kind of collective black formation. And so I guess in a way, one of the things that I wanted to raise was the possibility and the question around how that conceptual or reconceptualization or reconsideration of blackness in its kind of collective form gets kind of revisited. And to me, one of the interesting things was, to see the work, but also to understand how active and how passionate people were in a more collective form of activism, cultural activism. And that was not necessarily, it was obviously beautifully narrated by Keys, but I think in a way, how do we take that forward? How do we rethink that through into a kind of a space of 2012 for me? That's something that I think is very much needed. I think also the other thing that I thought would be really nice, and I thought was an amazing inspiration from today, was the influences and the shift that was made clearly from the aesthetics of the exploration of Black Britishness through to an exploration that explored a wider connectivity of the diaspora. And I think that was, for me, something quite interesting. When I think about Stuart Hall talking about where he reminisces and thinks about the Caribbean, and he talks about behind every verbal inflection is Africa. And I can't help but look at the work and thinking behind every verbal inflection or visual inflection was the Caribbean. And for me, there is something about how that extended kind of global and diasporic context becomes quite an important kind of extension, I feel like, to thinking about what we archive, how we have further discussions. And then lastly, at the moment, I'm in the Rivington building as an animateur at the Stuart Hall Library, and it's an interesting thing, and it causes me to think and read around the idea of the institutional legacy that we've now got as a direct result from the Blk Art Group and the work subsequent to that. And I actually remember reading this week, rereading Cobaina's chapter on diaspora didn't happen in a day in 2007, where he talks about this and raises this issue in 2000 of saying that we're on the cusp of something quite interesting in 2007. Here we have buildings, we have professional people all over in the curatorial space, we have critics, and we have people as artists producing. And I would really love to see how we actually have discussions that are taken forward which actually think about where those institutional places are. And I just wanted to share the quote that Cobaina made in the chapter. At what point does the consolidation of past achievement give way to complacency? Mm-hmm. And I think that's an interesting moment for us to reflect on, just the state of play at this point in time for our art institutions. So those have been my thoughts about how we might kind of think and take the dialogue further.
Wow, that's really passing the baton, isn't it? So I'm trying to pick this up. I'm so mindful of the time that what I'm going to do, if you'll forgive me, is really just read from my notes, and it may at some point sound like a list, but I hope you maybe can just take up some things and then maybe discuss it after. There's no time we have to come. So first I'll start with what I brought to the conference, what I came to the conference with. And this is a quote from Stuart Hall, where he cites Walter Benjamin in his essay Constituting an Archive, which is in third text from 2001, which is his introduction to the collection that Sonia Boyce and David A. Bailey collected, the Living Archive Papers. And the quote is as follows: "To articulate the past historically does not mean to recognize it the way it really was. It means to seize hold of a memory as it flashes up at a moment of danger." So I came to this conference thinking about danger. Where would the moment of danger be? Would there be some schism or fault line or memory that would flash up as a question of danger? And so I went through the talks listening out for this danger, and what I found was legacy, which was quite a surprise. Not the kind of danger I thought, but I looked out for it. And I'm just going to go through my list now. With Kobina, found legacy dispersed in practices. This was picked up on Jenny Arboin's question about small archives presenting a broad site of dispersal. Keith Piper's work made me think about the lack of consensus in the archive, and Courtney J. Martin kind of echoed that in her paper and presentation when she opened up the tension in the archive, particularly with that interview with Rashid and Frank in relation to blackness as an obstacle. I thought that question of tension in the archive was also then resonated in Sonia's presentation when she talked of the tension as a productive tension, thinking about the counter-hegemonic moments which appeared in the work such as the destruction of the National Front. And that brought us back to the focus on practice. And then when Marlene, in her question, kind of brought us back to this question about care, who cares about the work, I was led into the papers by Ella Spencer and Angeli Dallard-Clayton about who cared about the work of Maud Salter. And that poignant observation of Ella's that the work was in the V&A collection, but people in the V&A didn't even know that she had died, or at least didn't present the fact that she had died. So when I was presented with this question about legacy and how it had developed through all of these papers, and thinking left with the question of who cares, of course there's part of me that shouted, I care, we care. That was the moment of danger. Because I thought, is this a question of care in the academy? Thinking about the ways in which the practices which have developed and the audience that are here are, if you like, weighted by our academic distinction. And the fact that we have professors, doctors, readers bringing the wealth and care of these practices within the academy. And for me, that was the question of danger, because what I wanted to understand is where is the care outside of the academy, and where is the care in the institutions which must work alongside the academy if what we're seeking to achieve is going to be carried forward. And of course there are people here involved in those institutions, but part of my questions over the past few years have been back to this question of the curator, who in the most ordinary sense, as Paul Goodwin himself has taught me, is about someone who cares for objects. So for me, I'm left with this question of how we take out the wealth of the legacy that is contained in this room and take it and share it in those spaces, which are principally, I have to admit, after all these years, still the museum, I have to say, and still the exhibitionary apparatus. How can we transmit our knowledges into those spaces and make them meaningful?
It suddenly got very hot in here. All right. When Frank Bowling said, "What is special about it?" that was really painful. But in a sense, we have to think about what is of pedagogic value. What is it that was again, later on, said, they're in a hurry to shout. They're committed to a political struggle. That conversation was amazing. It brought out all these little points which we take for granted. And I started thinking about, is it really relative to a wider art history? We have to question those sort of things, those really basic aspects. Where are the other artists within this whole domain? How come we're speaking in a room alone? Why are we having so many private conversations? Where are the students from the rest of the Midlands, let alone from England, in this room? Why are there 2 students from this university present in this room? So is it of interest? Why aren't they here? And if it's of interest, how come we are not able, 30 years on, to make it relative? How are we evaluating it? What are we gathering? In what format? What is information which we're passing on? Even the title was questioned at one point about this notion of the idea of black. Should it be reused within the research group? Is it actually another wall? Are we going to very quickly reach another paradigm within which we're going to lose what we've gained? We've lost Innova. Let's put it. Oh, come on, let's be real. Sorry, did I get wrong? Am I alone?
Continue.
Where are the art historians?
This is the moment of danger.
Where's the arts council? Where's Train? Where are the deans of faculties? Please, at this point, they should be all here. If you call this a living archive, it's unwritten. They should be here to listen, make that contact. That contrapuntal which I liked and didn't like. Why wasn't Ophelia McQueen and Sean Ebara mentioned once? Yeah? I mean, and shouldn't they be in some format part of this dialogue? Yeah? Are these the bastards you talked about? Or are they the stepchildren? Which I thought was a better analogy for them, especially after the Venice Biennale. Or maybe they are the orphans which we're looking for. Yeah, there is a kind of a loss between us and them, which 30 years on, we should have been able to breach. 30 years we've been together, and we haven't even had one show with them. Have we? Not recently, anyway. There's so much. I mean, one riff that kept on coming into my head when I was listening to everything. It was something that goes something like, and you must probably remember this, there must be a way out of here, said the Joker to the Queen. There is too much confusion. And in that sense, there was so much going on today. It was so dense. It was so dense. It was amazing. I can go on for hours about how dense it was, even just the first talk. That's why I suggested this should have been a workshop, because I really wanted to stop you every other paragraph and say, can we just discuss that, please? It really was that moment, and it was really important to think that we needed that. We needed space. We need to be able to enable ourselves to download what some artists call vomit onto each other, because we don't meet for every 15, 20 years in a space like this, and it has to be much more frequent. There's so many points, but I won't go on. But what does seem to make sense is that we do, after 30 years of teaching, writing, curating, exhibition making, participating in so much, have a much more international profile than what we've got. And that international profile cannot be the global north. You're still going back and forth to New York, up there to America and the English-speaking world, thinking that's where it's at. You're not going to find it there. You haven't found it yet. There's so much more out there for this research group to make more of. There's a whole massive art scene going on in Asia. So big that we're not even aware of it. It's so strong. And Roshini was talking about earlier on about BRIC. Where's our relationship to BRIC? These are countries which have come up, who are looking to evaluate their projects the same way as we are. Thank you.
So before we close the conference, I'd like to hand over to my senior director of Autograph to close the conference.
I'm only going to say a few words because so much has been said, and I think as has been reiterated by every speaker that attends one. I think the value of the contributions are outstanding. I watched this thing over time kind of evolve with literally in choral conversations with Marnie. I watched the kind of sense of optimism slowly kind of potentially whipping away around the fact that an event like this was even possible to happen. An event like this really, in terms of the costs, is minimal in terms of money. But in terms of actually trying to get people to support it, I'm kind of shocked and I suppose dismayed by the very fact. By the very fact, because I've been doing that all day and driving me mad. But the very fact of, in many ways it's kind of metaphorical for where we are, and how we are. And I think the absences that have been mentioned here, especially by David and Shaheen, are kind of self-evident, really. I don't think we have to labour too much of the time on that. I think the question is really where we do go and what we take kind of hold of. There have been some great opportunities and some wonderful developments, and we should be very positive in that. And there have been some great platforms established over time through publishing. I kind of want to reference a few people like Gillian Towers and the initiative that she did while she was at Innova. There's an enormous legacy to understanding the historical importance of what's been achieved here. And I think it's easy to get people like that, because it's about institutions and it's about people in those institutions. I don't think there's anything, I think Brian is a kind of classic, I think Brian is a kind of classic example of an institution that can easily address the kind of issue of visibility and who gets through and seeing how, when, and why. And I love Cobblers Rights more than anybody else. And I love this Orphanista. I want to be one of those, and I want the T-shirt. And I kind of think there's probably a new movement there, which might kind of signal some kind of future. But there is still this sense of absence. These are words which have been thrown around today. There is this sense of blackness and a problem. There is this sense of the last colonials. I sometimes feel like we're the last man standing in terms of some of these issues. It can be quite depressing. But then again, I think it's some of the magic moments that we've had, that we've been able to do through the prism of the Rivington Place project. And in particular, I kind of enjoy what we've done with Rosemary Fanny Keowney's work, for example. Again, an artist that maybe could have referenced in a wider kind of context, in terms of what he actually represented and the various positions that he took on, in terms of groundbreaking, phenomenal work. And then I think about pathways and then issues of rights and race. And sometimes I think, let's have a riot. I think Shaheen has kind of put a gauntlet out there. I think there's a riot behind some of the statements which need to be reenacted. I think, why not? I mean, maybe we should. Maybe we should call a few things out. Actually, maybe we shouldn't be so polite about actually fighting for a kind of cultural space. I'm tired of the kind of polite debate that happens in these moments. It's like I think we allow people in many ways to get away with far too much. I mean, we have a right. I think it's fundamentally a right to participate in culture. What's wrong with actually asking for that? And in many ways, I think there was a kind of comfort in celebrity and all that money that was slushing around in the early. I think everybody imagined that there was a payday arriving. And we're now again in a critical time. And if I look at all the jobs that have been lost, it's not surprising that this moment becomes even more critical in terms of claiming that space. So that's about strategy. It's about kind of asking what the kind of new strategies are. And I want to just remind everybody that there's a statistic that I've become increasingly aware of, which is really disturbing, which is like 55% of young black men in London between 16 and 24 years old are out of school and out of work. That's 55%. So what's that going to say about our future claims in terms of opening doors and pathways? I just wanted to mention, work that, Maud Salter's work. There is a kind of opening up which Gemma has been at the forefront of over the last couple of years. So it's very much within the prism of our work at Autograph to salvage that history still. And the archive work that Raymond Sy's been doing, it's been primarily about trying to keep those legacies alive through the image, obviously through the prism of photography. I love the reference to Frank Goring's nigger room. I sometimes think I'm the only nigger in the room anyway. You know what I mean? It's like, how many black institutions that you've been in of late where you're the only black person in the room? Okay, that's a very kind of interesting scenario. I think it is a question of history and that visibility, and more importantly, that kind of sense of ownership. I think it's really kind of important that somehow we take ownership. And I say thank God for people in their front rooms and their who've kept hold of things. I think without a Jamu's collection of our autograph newsletters, we institutionally wouldn't have even had a full set of what we do. Because it's difficult to kind of keep hold of things. So, thank God for obsessive collectors. And then exile. I sometimes think that it's important to keep on asking that question, because for me, exile is not just about geography, it's also about feelings of being dislocated and not having the kind of capacity to keep on saying the same thing sometimes. It's like, do we have to constantly reinvent the wheel? So I'm just going to kind of close with really saying thank you, Marlene, and the Blk Art Group. I think the Blk Art Group have really laid the foundation for all kinds of benefits, for all kinds of institutions that spun out of that, for all kinds of funding initiatives, whether the Arts Council and their quasi kind of labelling around ethnic minority arts and cultural diversity. At least the question was asked, and it's interesting to reference Rashid and Frank. Watching them kind of still tackle that question is really interesting, because in many ways it is an unfinished conversation. It will go on, and we should be part of those conversations. And I don't think we should be talking about closure. We should be talking about opening these things up in a much wider context. So I'm just dim the lights. I'm just going to finish with a little 2-minute.
We are not prepared any longer to take a marginal role in institutions which like to, as it were, acknowledge us in a token way when they want a flash of the exotic or the tropical to enliven a cold evening. We are here to stay. We are in the center of the creative and cultural life of the society, and we require the jobs, the training, the opportunities, the funding. We want the path open, especially for the young people of this society, the young black people of this society, who have created in their myriad art forms, from writing, poetry, dance, music, right through to rap, created a new culture, a culture which in its variety and power astonishes now the eyes of young white people in the society, which is a mark, a sign that they are the people of the future. And that needs organization and funding. And we have to go out and get it, because it's ours.
Sorry?
Brian.
Oh, sorry, I was talking about Brian Briggs from Liverpool. Absolutely, sorry. Sorry.
Wow. I'm not going to summarise anything. I'm not even going to attempt to. I'm just going to do domestic arrangements. Okay. But I have to say the most enormous thank you to everybody for being here, for creating an electric atmosphere, for having the conversations, even when I'm trying to get you to sit down and listen, to talking. So, you know, I'm really getting a sense of a day that's been hugely worthwhile. Worth all the pain and sleep. So a huge thank you to you all for coming. Secondly, a huge thank you for those people that have been very closely involved in getting today and the project off the ground. So all the speakers who really, they've worked today for love and not money. I'm telling you, believe me, there's been a lot of love and not very much pay for all of these people. So I'm thankful for them. And I want to particularly thank some of you old dirty bastards who have put your money where your mouth is. When others who will remain nameless, Shaheen Merali. Yeah. Some others that I haven't mentioned at all by name at all, or even hinted at.
Do it.
Wouldn't do that. So I'm really grateful to those that kind of stepped in, recognised the importance of this project, and helped us to get it on the road today. Yeah. And then to Paul, Sonia, Claudette, and Keith, who have been inundated with my emails. I've just sent 5 when one would have been probably enough. You know, they've been patient with me. And to Gary, Stuart, and Trevor Matheson, who have done and the sons of Gary, Stuart, and Trevor Matheson, they're not here today because they're just sick of us really. But they, you know, because they're all young and technologically whatever, and they can do MailChimp and stuff that I don't even know what it means. So thanks for all of those people. Now,
and a big up, of course.